All right, welcome back. Here we're going to talk about experience-based questions. Experience-based questions. Now, every school tends to ask one or two of these types of questions. What are experience-based questions? Well, they are exactly what they sound to be. You have questions like, tell me about a leadership experience, or tell me about a teamwork experience, or tell me about a challenging interaction, or tell me about how you handled conflict, or tell me about a time when you failed. These are all different types of questions that ask for your experience in that situation. Okay. Within this program, I will have a document with a list of hundreds of questions that you can prepare for, but just focus on the ones that are relevant to you. Okay, don't try. It's really just more about understanding your story well, but also have a teamwork experience, a leadership experience, a failure experience. What was your greatest accomplishment in your career progression? Okay, these are all experience-based questions, and they can all be addressed with a certain type of structure. What's the underlying question? This is the theme that you have seen on and on, time and time again throughout this interview course. Is there's always an underlying question to a question that the interviewer has asked you. It's not about that specific question. It's what what information is the interviewer looking for that will help him or her answer his or her questions that he needs to respond back to the AdCom as best as possible. Other experience-based questions could include something like, challenging situations. Tell me about a time when you had to interact with somebody who wasn't carrying his or her own weight. Tell me about a time when you were challenged at work. Tell me about a time when you thought outside of the box. Tell me about a time when you had to negotiate something, or tell me about a time when an idea that you had was not accepted. How did you handle that situation? Tell me about a time when you handled an ethical dilemma, when you were, in a situation where you knew it was wrong, and what did you do? Okay, what would you have liked to do? Tell me about a time that you were frustrated with your work, or tell me about a time when you have failed. All of them, they all have the following underlying question, which is, what did you learn from the situation? How did it make you better? Or how do you plan on improving after that experience? So when you're answering this, you have to think about, how did you grow as a professional after that experience? What improved, or what was revealed to you that you need to improve in that sense? Let's look at the structure here, and then maybe you'll get a better picture of what I mean. So when you do talk about an experience-based question, it's basically storytelling. You're telling a story. You're telling a story about a time when you did something about something. Okay? So first of all, set the plot, set the stage. Just like in your walk me through your resume question, you're going to set the stage here. What's the situation? What was going on at this time for this specific example? Afterwards, talk about the action you took. Okay, what was the action that you took? What did you do in order to handle that situation? What was it that you did? How did you do it? What was the initiative that you took? What was your mindset at that moment when you took this decision upon yourself and decided to act? All right. The third thing that you want to address are the results. Well, what was the result here? What was the outcome? Okay. What was the outcome of this situation? Was it a positive outcome? Was it a negative outcome? Did you consider this to be successful? Was this the best decision you could have made? Was this the worst one that you could have made? It's fine. Remember what I said about weaknesses? It's okay to talk about failures. You should talk about failures. But you need to make sure that you include how you overcame that failure. In the same sense, that's the same thing for experience-based questions. You're going to talk about the situation. You're going to talk about your action. You're going to talk about your outcome. And then you top it off with the lesson learned. The moral of the story. The moral of the story. Okay? So if you think about it if you break it down, it's SAOM. There's no way to really, make it sound nice, but it's just a sound. SAOM. Okay? Situation or scenario, action, outcome, and the moral of the story. What is the moral of the story? The moral of the story is basically, you don't have to mention the moral. Just say the word moral, but you can say, what I learned from this experience, what my greatest takeaway here was, it was that I learned to handle a specific conflict. It was to learn that people think differently. It depends. It all depends on the experience. It all depends on what you actually learned, what you came out from it. What you would do differently. If you could go back and do it differently, what is it that you would do? Here I'm actually. It's funny because these are pretty basic, easy answering questions, but there's a way to make it harder. And I wish schools would ask this question. This is a question that I ask all my students whenever I'm doing an interview coaching session. And it's a question that actually is more personal. It's for a personal reason of mine. I want to get to know the interviewee better. And I found that this is something that I could. This is a question that I could ask that really reveals a lot about the student. So I'm going to ask you this one, because if you can answer this well, then you can. It really helps you to answer the experience-based question. And the question is this: if you've ever seen the movie Back to the Future, Marty McFly gets into a time machine and flies back into the past. Well, the first one, right? If you were able to go back into your past at any point in your past, and you could change one thing, what is that one thing you would change, and how would that change everything else that happened afterwards? Where would you be today? That's the question. Okay? Some people go all the way back to their childhood. Other people go back to a specific career moment, or a specific career decision, or a career move. Some people go back to even something personal, like a dating decision. Okay, and it's really interesting to see what that person prioritizes. Is it something that he really regrets? Is it something that he believes that could have improved his future? Very interesting question. Think about that, and think about how you're going to answer that question with the SAOM style structure. You talk about the scenario. What would you do? What would you go back and do? What's the action? How would you change it? What would happen? What's the outcome? Where would you be today had you changed that? And what's the moral of the story? By answering that question, using that structure, I guarantee you that any of the experience-based questions that you may be asked, you'll be able to answer pretty easily. So when you're practicing these questions at home in front of the mirror, and I have a video on practicing that you guys can watch, that I'm going to teach you how to really improve the interview practice without even having an interview coach. You don't need an interview coach. Unless you really want one, then you have me for that, or many other great professionals out there that can help you with that sense. But when you're practicing at home on these experience-based questions, I want you to relax and keep in mind that it's just all about telling your story. But the underlying question here, the underlying question that they want answered is, what's the moral of the story? What did you take away from it? How did this help you grow and become better? Okay? How did it grow and help you become better? So, it's... let me give you one example, just to kind of finish this topic off. Let's see, leadership example? No, sacrifice? No. Let's talk about a failure. Okay, let's say that the scenario was this. I'm going to give you my failure, and it's not even a professional one. It's actually a personal one, and I can say this that this is something that I could have done better. I used to coach a basketball team among my peers, among my friends. So I was friends with this basketball team. I was their coach, but I was also coach player. And I really, I spent about 4 years coaching them, and I sacrificed a lot of my time and energy to really prepare them and help them to become better basketball players in general. But also, I've always believed that basketball and real life, they go hand in hand. Now, I really focused on trying to be the best leader as possible, and in many times I do believe that my greatest mistake here was sometimes forgetting that they were my friends. And so my leadership style may have shifted sometimes towards a more dictatorship style, where it was just, it's my way or the highway, rather than being more democratic. So I consider that to be a failure, because today I am no longer part of the team. I am also no longer their coach, and I barely see them as friends as well. I mean, we meet once in a while, but that's not because it's more of a rare occasion. Whereas in the beginning, we used to hang out maybe 4 or 5 times a week, either for lunch or dinner or for practice. But today it's kind of like once a month I might see them. So I believe that my failure as a leader, as somebody who could manage the 3 different compasses that were involved, being a coach, being a player, and being a friend. And I had a hard time managing all 3 and making sure that I knew the boundaries of what I could or couldn't do as a leader there. It really affected the overall friendship. And in the end, I believe that the one thing I could have really done differently there was maybe listen more, listen to them more than trying to implement my own ideas. And understanding that after some time, today I'm actually coaching another team, and it's a youth basketball team. The oldest kid is right now 16, 17 years old. And it's funny because you think, and I'm not a player there, so there are many aspects. So there are 2 compasses have left the field for me. I'm no longer a player, and they're not my friends. They're my kids. But the scope of being a coach is there, and I am their leader. And because they are younger, the tendency to act more of a dictatorship style leader is stronger. But I'm learned from my mistakes. I'm listening to them. I'm listening to their needs. I'm trying to figure out what it is that they want and what it is that motivate them, so that I make sure that they are all focused on the single goal, on the single task at hand, which is to improve individually, but for the benefit as a whole. That was a failure that I wish I can take back, but I wouldn't take back because I learned so much from it. Boom. Okay? Now all you do is just fill in the blanks, take out the basketball part, and put in a professional project. Okay? So I just wanted to give you an example. I covered the scenario. I talked about what actions I took. I talked about the outcome or the results, and then I gave you the moral of the story and how I became a better person too. Good? All right. If there's something that you didn't understand quite well, if you have a question, definitely send that to me, and I'll try to, I will slowly build a frequently asked questions database so that you can take a look in the event that this is something that you're having trouble with. But as far as answering this storytelling question, there's no secret to it, as long as you make sure you give a strong moral at the end. That's it for now. See you in a bit.